Hello dear friends, once again it's very hearty and warm welcome in this new lecture. Dear friends, in our today's lecture we are going to start the study of equally important topic of this chapter, that is the human brain. आज आपण एका नव्या आणि अत्यंत महत्त्वाच्या अशा टॉपिकच्या अभ्यासाला सुरुवात करतोय, अर्थात ह्यूमन ब्रेन. First of all, let me tell you that in Latin language the brain is also termed as encephalon. Here en it stands for enclosed, and cephalon, this word stands for structure present in the cephalic region. It means brain is enclosed in the cephalic region, that is head region, so also it is termed as encephalon. Now the human brain, it forms the anterior part of central nervous system. In our previous lectures I have already told you that the human nervous system is broadly divided into three subsystems. आपण पूर्वीच्या लेक्चरला अभ्यासलंय की ह्यूमन नर्वस सिस्टीम मानवी मज्जासंस्थेचे तीन उपप्रकार पाडले जातात, such as सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टीम, मध्यवर्ती चेतासंस्था, पेरिफेरल नर्वस सिस्टीम and autonomic nervous system. Now as we are known that the central nervous system, it consists of brain and spinal cord. सेंट्रल नर्वस सिस्टीम मध्ये ब्रेन आणि स्पायनल कॉर्ड, मेंदू आणि मज्जारज्जू यांचा समावेश होतो. So here I said that the brain, it forms the anterior part of central nervous system and spinal cord, it forms the posterior part of central nervous system. Actually the brain, it contribute about 98% of the total central nervous system, and that spinal cord just contribute 2% of the CNS. Now the human brain is comparatively large. It is oval or slightly flattened, whitish or cream colored, soft and hollow structure. I have already mentioned that the brain and spinal cord, these both structures are not solid, these are hollow. It means they enclose cavities. या आधी पण आपण चर्चा केली आहे की ब्रेन आणि स्पायनल कॉर्ड हे हॉलो आहे, त्यांच्या आतमध्ये पोकळ्या आहेत. सो हियर आय सेड दॅट द ब्रेन, इट इज कंपॅरेटिव्हली लार्ज, ओव्हल, स्लाइटली फ्लॅटेंड, व्हाइटिश टू क्रीमी कलर्ड, and it is hollow structure. It is said that the development of brain completes around the age of 6 years, and it is estimated, not yet sure, but it is estimated that the human brain contains about 30,000 million nerve cells. 30,000 million nerve cells. Of course, they show highly complicated neural circuit in different parts that we are going to discuss. Now, let me tell you about the weight of brain. सर्वसाधारण प्रौढ व्यक्तीमध्ये ब्रेनचं वेट किती असतं, वजन किती असतं ते या ठिकाणी मी मांडतोय. In normal adult human being, the weight of brain is about 1350 to 1380 grams, while the volume of brain in adult male is comparatively more, that is 1244 cc, and in adult female it is about 1131 cc. cc, it stands for the cubic centimeter, but the largest size of brain is near about 1499, and the smallest size of brain in human being is near about 1053 cc. So here we were discussing about the weight and volume of brain. I said that in normal adult human being the weight of brain is near about 1350 to 1380 grams, while the volume of brain in adult male is up to 1244 cc and in adult female it is 1131 cc. Now we people have to discuss about the different parts and subparts of the brain. I am going to draw here a table and going to mention the different major parts of brain in tabular form. Let us talk about it. Now let us talk about the different parts of human brain. Human brain is broadly divided into three major parts such as forebrain, also called prosencephalon, midbrain, that is mesencephalon, and hindbrain, that is rhombencephalon. So I said that the human brain is broadly divided into three major parts such as forebrain, midbrain and hindbrain. The forebrain is further divided into three parts such as RHINENCEPHALON, that is nothing but the olfactory lobes, TELENCEPHALON, that is cerebrum, and DIENCEPHALON. It may be known as THALAMENCEPHALON. It means the forebrain is further divided into three major parts: RHINENCEPHALON or olfactory lobes, TELENCEPHALON or cerebrum, and DIENCEPHALON. It may be known as THALAMENCEPHALON. Actually, DIENCEPHALON, it again consists of three parts, namely epithalamus, thalamus singular, thalami plural, and hypothalamus, about which we are going to discuss in detail. The midbrain is further divided into two parts such as crura cerebri. It may be known as cerebral peduncle, and second part is corpora quadrigemina. Corpora quadrigemina. While the hindbrain is divided into two major parts such as metencephalon and myelencephalon. Metencephalon, it includes two structures, namely cerebellum, it is also called as the lesser brain, and second part, that is pons varoli. On the other hand, the myelencephalon is nothing but the medulla oblongata. It is the posterior most part of the brain. In this manner, here I have mentioned the major parts and subparts of human brain, and we people have to discuss about all these parts one by one each. So now we are going to start our study from the first major part of brain, that is forebrain or prosencephalon. Okay, so let us start its study. So the first major part of brain is forebrain, that is prosencephalon. I told you just now that the forebrain is further divisible into three parts such as olfactory lobes, RHINENCEPHALON, cerebrum, that is TELENCEPHALON, and DIENCEPHALON. Here, first of all, we are going to talk about the cerebrum. Cerebrum in Latin language also known as TELENCEPHALON. The cerebrum is called as the greater brain because it is the largest part of the brain and contribute about 80 to 85% of total brain weight. Cerebrumला ग्रेटर ब्रेन म्हणजे मोठा मेंदू असं म्हणतात, कारण हा ब्रेनचा सगळ्यात मोठा भाग आहे आणि तो जवळपास 80 ते 85% भाग हा ब्रेनचा रिप्रेझेंट करत असतो. नाउ दिस सेरेब्रम is partially divided into two identical halves. It is partially divided into two equal parts by means of a median or longitudinal groove known as sagittal fissure. Let me show in the model. Now please look here in this model. In this model, this entire pinkish structure represents the cerebrum. This is the anterior side, that is front side. This is posterior or back side. This is upper and this is lower, superior and inferior side of the brain. Now I said that the cerebrum, it is the largest part of the brain, may be known as the greater brain, and it is partially divided into two identical parts, into two identical halves by means of a median or longitudinal groove known as sagittal fissure. या ठिकाणी आपण मॉडेल मध्ये बघू शकता की हा जो संपूर्ण सेरेब्रम आहे, या सेरेब्रमचे अंशतः पार्शियली दोन समान भाग होत असतात. कशामुळे? तर मध्यभागी असणाऱ्या एका खाचेमुळे. Here is a median groove, here is a longitudinal groove. It may be known as sagittal fissure. So once again listen that the cerebrum is partially divided into two identical halves by means of a sagittal fissure, median fissure or longitudinal fissure. And these two identical halves of cerebrum are known as cerebral hemispheres. Let me write at the blackboard. Cerebral hemispheres. Actually, name itself indicates hemi. This word stands for the half. Half sphere. If the cerebrum is considered as a sphere, then half part of this sphere is nothing but the hemisphere. Now, these cerebral hemispheres, they show convolutions and grooves on its surface. It means the surface of cerebral hemispheres is not smooth. या ठिकाणी आपण बघू शकता की सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरचा जो हा पृष्ठभाग आहे, सरफेस आहे, तो स्मूथ नसतो, गुळगुळीत नसतो, बट इट शोज अ वेवी नेचर. It shows many ridges and grooves. It shows many convolutions and grooves. अर्थात या ठिकाणी सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरच्या सरफेसवर उंचवटे आहेत आणि खोलगट भाग सुद्धा आहे. लेट मी शो इन डायग्राम. कन्सिडर हियर इज सपोज टू बी द लॅटरल व्ह्यू ऑफ सेरेब्रम. या ठिकाणी मी दाखवतोय, या ठिकाणी मी लॅटरल व्ह्यू मध्ये एक सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअर दाखवलाय आणि या सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरच्या सरफेसवर हे जे उंचवटे आहेत, कन्व्होल्यूशन्स आहेत, these are known as gyri, singular gyrus, and the grooves are known as sulci, singular sulcus. उंचवट्यांना गायरी आणि खोलगट भागांना सल्काय असं म्हणतात. Due to these gyri and sulci, the total surface area of cerebrum is greatly increased. या गायरी आणि सल्कायमुळे, उंचवट्यांमुळे, घड्या आणि वळ्यांमुळे सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरचा पृष्ठभाग हा खूप वाढलेला असतो. It is said that the number, pattern and arrangement of these gyri and sulci is directly related with the intelligence of that individual. Now, in addition to these gyri and sulci, each cerebral hemisphere shows three distinct sulci, three distinct fissures. या ठिकाणी या नॉर्मल गायरी आणि सल्काय व्यतिरिक्त प्रत्येक सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरवर तीन स्पष्ट डिस्टिंक्ट अशा ग्रूव्ज दिसतात. लेट मी शो हियर इन मॉडेल. कन्सिडर हियर इज ओनली वन सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअर. या ठिकाणी मी एक सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअर तुम्हाला दाखवतोय आणि या प्रत्येक सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअरवर तीन स्पष्ट डिस्टिंक्ट अशा ग्रूव्ज दिसतात. लुक हियर, I have shown with the help of chalk. This black line, it represents one sulcus. It is known as the central sulcus. Second is here lateral sulcus. With the help of black color I have mentioned, here is a lateral sulcus. And here is a third sulcus. It is known as Parieto-occipital sulcus. I said that each cerebral hemisphere shows three distinct sulci, namely central sulcus, lateral sulcus, it may be known as the Salvian sulcus, and Parieto-occipital sulcus. That sulci I am going to show there in diagram. Please look there. Here is a central sulcus. Sulcus, a distinct group. Here is a lateral sulcus. Here is a lateral sulcus and Parieto-occipital sulcus. Let me label central sulcus, lateral sulcus. It may be known as Salvian sulcus and Parieto-occipital sulcus. Because of these three sulci, each cerebral hemisphere further get divided partially into four major lobes. Let us see there in the diagram as well as in this model. The central sulcus, it demarcates this front lobe known as frontal lobe. Consider, here is a frontal lobe. It is located just behind our forehead. In this model I can show this is the frontal lobe which is present at the front side and just below the forehead. Then the second lobe which occupies top position, it is known as parietal lobe. Here in this model we can observe here is a parietal lobe which occupies the top position. Then occipital lobe, it is present along the dorsal side. Here in this model this is occipital lobe, and with the help of white chalk I am going to show here is a temporal lobe which is present laterally. Temporal lobe. It means I said each cerebral hemisphere is further divided into four major lobes, namely frontal, present at the front side, parietal which occupies top position, occipital present behind, and temporal present along the lateral side because of these three distinct sulci. Am I right? Once again look at the diagram. Here central sulcus, it demarcates the frontal lobe and parietal lobe. The parieto-occipital sulcus, it separates the parietal lobe and occipital lobe, while the lateral sulcus or Salvian sulcus, it separates the temporal lobe from frontal and parietal lobe. In addition to these four lobes, या चार lobes व्यतिरिक्त, there is presence of one another fifth lobe known as insula or insular cortex. Insula or insular cortex, which is embedded within the lateral sulci. Lateral sulciच्या आतल्या बाजूने हा इन्सुला किंवा इन्सुलर लोब हा पाचवा लोबही प्रेझेंट असतो, but it is hidden inside and that's why it is not visible externally. Now we people have to understand about some other important features. Listen. Surface area of cerebral hemispheres is known as cerebral cortex. Here I am going to draw another diagram. Once again, just consider here is a single cerebral hemisphere, lateral view. I said that the peripheral or surface part of the cerebral hemispheres is known as cerebral cortex. It is made up of gray matter. सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअर्सचा जो बाहेरचा भाग आहे, कडेचा भाग आहे, त्याला सेरेब्रल कॉर्टेक्स असं म्हणतात आणि तो ग्रे मॅटरने तयार झालेला असतो. व्हॉट इज ग्रे मॅटर? ऑलरेडी वी हॅव डिस्कस्ड. व्हाईल द इंटरनल पार्ट ऑफ सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फिअर्स is known as cerebral medulla and it is made up of white matter. Look, here I am going to show. Here is a cerebral medulla. It is made up of white matter. The cavities enclosed by cerebral hemispheres are known as lateral ventricles or may be known as first and second ventricles or may be known as paracel. Let me show in diagram. Look here. Here is supposed to be the cavity enclosed by this cerebral hemisphere. I said this cavity is known as lateral ventricle. As there are two cerebral hemispheres and that's why there are two lateral ventricles, they may be named as first and second ventricles or paracel. Now, these both cerebral hemispheres are interconnected with each other ventrally by means of a thick band of nerves. Ventral side ने खालच्या बाजूने दोन्ही cerebral hemispheres एकमेकाला जोडलेले असतात by means of a thick band of nerves known as corpus callosum. Let me show in this diagram. Suppose here is that corpus callosum. कल्पना करा या ठिकाणी हा corpus callosum आहे. Corpus callosum म्हणजे this is made up of simply a thick band of nerves which connect both cerebral hemispheres with each other and the anterior part of this corpus callosum is again known as genu. या ठिकाणी मी corpus callosum लिहितोय. या कॉर्पस कॅलोझमचा अँटेरियर जो पार्ट आहे त्याला गेनू असं म्हणतात and posterior fold is known as splenium. Of course, it connects both cerebral hemispheres from the ventral side. I told you just now that the cerebral hemisphere encloses the cavities, that is lateral ventricles, and these lateral ventricles are not empty. You know, these lateral ventricles are filled by means of cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, ज्यावर आपण आधी चर्चा केलेली आहे. Now, the roof of the cerebral hemisphere is very thin. या cerebral hemisphere चं जे रूफ आहे, वरचा जो भाग आहे, तो अतिशय thin असतो and that roof of cerebral hemispheres is known as neuropallium or simply known as pallium. While the floor of cerebral hemisphere चं जे तळ आहे, floor आहे, that floor is known as Corpora Striata. Corpora Striata. Actually, in the floor of cerebral hemispheres, in the floor of cerebrum, there are presence of many large masses of gray matter embedded in the white matter. या cerebrum किंवा cerebral hemispheres च्या तळाला त्या ठिकाणी असंख्य असे ग्रे मॅटरचे मासेस व्हाईट मॅटर मध्ये विखुरलेले असतात. That masses of gray matter in the white matter are known as basal nuclei. Listen, they are called as the basal nuclei, may be called basal ganglia or may be known as the nuclei of cerebrum. Is that clear? Now we have to move to the different centers and different areas, functional areas present on these different lobes of cerebrum. आता आपल्याला या ठिकाणी या cerebral hemispheres वर असणारे हे जे चार प्रमुख लोब्स आहेत त्यावर कोणकोणते सेंटर्स आहेत, कोणकोणते एरियाज आहेत आणि त्यांचं कार्य काय, त्यांचं फंक्शन काय ते या ठिकाणी समजून घ्यायचे आहे. I am going to repeat briefly what we studied just now. Listen carefully. I said that the cerebrum or telencephalon, it is the largest part of brain. It may be known as the greater brain. It contributes about 80 to 85% of total brain weight. Cerebrum is further divisible partially into two identical halves known as cerebral hemispheres. Each cerebral hemisphere shows many gyri or sulci, that is convolutions and grooves on its surface, because of which the surface of cerebral hemispheres appears quite wavy and it increases the total surface of cerebrum. In addition to these normal gyri and sulci, each cerebral hemisphere shows three distinct sulci, grooves, namely central, lateral and parieto-occipital sulcus. That three sulci divide each cerebral hemisphere into four lobes, namely frontal, present towards front side, then parietal, present at the top, then lateral, temporal and last, that is occipital. I also told you that the cerebral hemispheres shows a peripheral part known as cerebral cortex. It is made up of grey matter, while the internal part is known as medulla, made up of white matter. The cavity enclosed by cerebral hemispheres is known as lateral ventricle, or that cavities are called first and second ventricles or paracele, which remain filled by means of cerebrospinal fluid. Both cerebral hemispheres are connected ventrally by means of thick band of nerves known as corpus callosum. Actually, this corpus callosum is considered as the largest commissure in the body of human. Commissure याचा अर्थ कनेक्टिव्ह, म्हणजे नर्वस सिस्टीम मध्ये असणाऱ्या वेगवेगळ्या भागांना जोडणारे जे काही थिक बँड्स आहेत नर्व्सचे, त्यांना कमिश्युअर म्हणतात आणि हा कॉर्पस कॅलोझम हा लार्जेस्ट कमिश्युअर मानला जातो. देन द रूफ ऑफ सेरेब्रल हेमिस्फियर्स इज नोन as neuropallium or simply pallium, while floor as corpora striata. I said that in the floor of cerebrum there are presence of many large masses of grey matter embedded in the white matter. They are called as the basal nuclei, basal ganglia, or may be known as the nuclei of cerebrum. Actually, the corpora striatum is nothing but the example of basal nuclei, basal ganglia. Now, we people have to discuss here about the different centers, about the different areas present on these different lobes of cerebral hemispheres. Let us talk one by one each. Now please look once again at this diagram. You know, here I have shown the lateral view of single cerebral hemisphere and also the four major lobes of each cerebral hemisphere. I have already here shown with the help of different colors that different lobes such as frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe and temporal lobe. Let us talk about the functional areas, functional centers present on that different lobes. सुरुवातीला आपण या ठिकाणी फ्रंटल लोबचा विचार करूया. The frontal lobe, it shows motor area, premotor area and motor association area. Let me tell you about the function of that different areas. Look at the diagram. The motor area, it is present just front side of the central sulcus. You know this groove, this sulcus is called central sulcus, isn't it? Which demarcates the frontal lobe from parietal lobe. फ्रंटल लोब आणि परायटल लोब यांना वेगळं दाखवणारी ही जी सल्कस आहे हिला आपण सेंट्रल सल्कस म्हणतो. थोडा वेळापूर्वी आपण बघितलं. आणि या सेंट्रल सल्कसच्या आधीचा जो भाग आहे फ्रंटल लोबचा, इट रिप्रेझेंट्स द मोटार एरिया. दिस मोटार एरिया may be known as general motor area and it controls different voluntary muscle activities, voluntary movements. You know, voluntary movements or voluntary activities means those activities which are carried out according to our will. आपल्या इच्छेनुसार म्हणजे ज्या ऐच्छिक क्रिया आहेत त्यांच्यावर नियंत्रण ठेवण्याचे कार्य हा जनरल मोटार एरिया करत असतो. जस्ट नियर टू दिस जनरल मोटार एरिया there is a premotor area. Look, here is the premotor area. It controls involuntary muscle activities, as well as it acts as the center of autonomic nervous system. म्हणजे हा जो प्रीमोटार एरिया आहे तो वेगवेगळ्या अनैच्छिक क्रियांवर नियंत्रण ठेवतो. तसंच autonomic nervous system, you know, it is the third major subdivision of human nervous system. त्यावरही ऑटोनॉमिक नर्वस सिस्टीमच्या कार्यावरही नियंत्रण ठेवण्याचं कार्य हा प्रीमोटार एरिया करत असतो. while the third major area is nothing but the motor association area. Motor association area. It is responsible for the coordination between the sensations and movements. Sensations याचा अर्थ संवेदना आणि त्या संवेदनेला अनुरूप अशा वेगवेगळ्या हालचाली मुवमेंट्स यांच्यामध्ये कोऑर्डिनेशन समन्वय राखण्यावर नियंत्रण ठेवण्याचे कार्य, रेग्युलेट करण्याचे कार्य हा मोटार असोसिएशन एरिया करत असतो. In addition to that, it is said that the motor association area it also controls different mental abilities. हा मोटार असोसिएशन एरिया आपल्या वेगवेगळ्या मेंटल ॲबिलिटीज याचा अर्थ आपल्या ज्या विविध मानसिक क्षमता आहेत त्यांचंही केंद्र मानलं जातं. such as say intelligence, thinking, reasoning, judgment, memory and so on. अर्थात या ज्या वेगवेगळ्या मानसिक क्षमता आहेत, विचार क्षमता, बुद्धिमत्ता, स्मरणशक्ती, कार्यकारण भाव ओळखणं वगैरे ह्या निर्णय क्षमता या सगळ्यांवर नियंत्रण ठेवण्याचं कार्य हा मोटार असोसिएशन एरिया करत असतो. The frontal lobe also shows presence of one important center, that is Broca's area. Let me show diagrammatically. Consider here is supposed to be the Broca's area. It is also called motor speech area, and it translates our thoughts into speech. It translates our thoughts into speech. अर्थात आपले विचार हे प्रत्यक्ष शब्दामध्ये व्यक्त करण्याची क्रिया नियंत्रित ठेवण्याचे कार्य हा ब्रोकाज एरिया किंवा मोटार स्पीच एरिया करत असतो. Now come to the parietal lobe. दूसरा लोब आहे parietal lobe. Parietal lobe mainly contain the sensory area. General sensory area may be known as the soma aesthetic area. Let me write. General sensory area or may be known as the soma aesthetic area. It is responsible to receive different types of sensory stimuli. वेगवेगळ्या प्रकारच्या सेन्सरी म्हणजे विविध अवयवांकडून येणाऱ्या ज्या संवेदना आहेत, सर्वसाधारण संवेदना आहेत, त्या स्वीकारण्याचं काम, त्याचं ॲनालिसिस, इंटरप्रिटेशन करण्याचं कार्य या ठिकाणी जनरल सेन्सरी एरियामध्ये केलं जातं. सच as टच, पेन, प्रेशर, हीट, कोल्ड एटसेट्रा. अर्थात स्पर्श किंवा उष्णता किंवा थंडपणा यासारख्या ज्या जनरल सेन्सेशन्स आहेत त्या परसिव्ह करणं, त्यांचं ॲनालिसिस करण्याचं कार्य हा जनरल सेन्सरी एरिया करत असतो. At the base of this parietal lobe, there is a presence of another area known as sensory speech area, or may be known as Wernicke's center. It helps to understand the spoken or written words. It helps to understand the spoken or written words. याचा अर्थ दुसरा व्यक्ती काय बोलतोय त्याचे शब्द, त्याचं बोलणं किंवा लिहिलेलं एखादं लिखाण ते वाचल्यानंतर त्याचं अंडरस्टँडिंग होण्यासाठी हा एरिया कार्य करत असतो. इट इज नोन ॲज सेन्सरी स्पीच एरिया और वर्निकेस एरिया. नाउ just at the base of parietal lobe one more center is present known as gustatory center. You know, gustation, it stands for the taste. It is responsible for the perception of sense of taste. Sarvakendra. Now come to the occipital lobe. Occipital lobe, it shows presence of visual area, general visual area, sensory visual area, which is responsible to perceive the stimulus of vision as well as the association visual area. Here the analysis, interpretation of the visual stimuli is carried out, visual impulses is carried out, and if necessary the information is stored. So mainly the occipital lobe, it contains the visual area and association visual area. Finally come to the temporal lobe. Temporal lobe, it contains two major areas. First one, which lie towards front side, that is olfactory center. Olfactory center, of course it is related with the olfaction, that is sense of smell. It controls the sense of smell, gandha jnana. And also one more center is there at the junction of temporal, frontal and parietal lobe. या तिन्ही लोब्सच्या जंक्शनवर here is a presence of auditory center, auditory area. Of course audition, it stands for the hearing, sense of hearing, means this center controls the sense of hearing. So here I have mentioned the major functional areas present on these four different lobes. Now we have to move towards the second part of forebrain, that is nothing but the olfactory lobes, which may be called as the RHINENCEPHALON. Before going to the RHINENCEPHALon, as usual I am going to give a very fast and brief revision of these different functional areas present on different lobes of cerebral hemisphere. Look at the diagram. Here is a frontal lobe. Am I right? I told you that the frontal lobe shows presence of general motor area, which control different voluntary movements, voluntary activities. Then premotor area, it controls involuntary activities. Motor association area, it is responsible for the coordination between the sensations and movements, as well as it is considered as the center of different mental abilities. Then here is a Broca's area or motor speech area. It translates our thoughts into speech. विचारांना शब्दामध्ये व्यक्त करण्याची क्रिया हा नियंत्रित करत असतो. That is Broca's area. Parietal lobe, it contains general sensory area. It is responsible to pursue the different general sensations such as touch, pain, pressure, heat, cold, etc. There is sensory speech area, may be known as the Wernicke's area. It helps to understand the written words, or may be known as the spoken words. And the gustatory center. Gustatory, it stands for gustation, that is sense of taste. Occipital lobe shows presence of visual area and visual association area. It means it is mainly concerned with the sense of vision, to pursue the stimulus of vision and interpretation, analysis of that impulses and storage of necessary information, while the temporal lobe shows presence of olfactory center concerned with the sense of olfaction, that is smell, and auditory center concerned with the sense of hearing. Now we have to move to the second part of forebrain, that is olfactory lobes. Let us move. second part of the forebrain, that is olfactory lobes. You know, these are also known as the RHINENCEPHALON. Actually, olfactory lobes, these are paired structures and these are located antero-ventral to the cerebral hemispheres. Antero-ventrally. Please look at the diagram. You know, here is a lateral view of cerebral hemisphere. This is the front side, that is anterior side of the cerebrum. This is posterior side of the cerebrum. It is supposed to be the dorsal, and here is the ventral surface. Now I said that the olfactory lobes are paired structures. Olfactory lobes हे जोडीने असतात and these are located antero-ventral to the cerebral hemispheres. Let me show in diagram. This is the anterior side and this is ventral side. So the olfactory lobes are located somewhat here. Here a single olfactory lobe I am going to show. या ठिकाणी एक olfactory lobe दाखवलेला आहे. Okay, these are paired structure. As far as concerned with this model, या मॉडेलचा जर आपण विचार केला तर या ठिकाणी आपल्याला दिसतंय की या मॉडेल मध्ये हा इंटिरियर सरफेस आहे, हा डॉर्सल सरफेस आहे, हा वेंट्रल सरफेस आहे. अँटेरो वेंट्रल म्हणजे या ठिकाणी जर तुम्हाला दिसत असेल तर या मॉडेल मध्ये हे जे दोन बारीक स्ट्रक्चर्स आपल्याला दिसतायत, they represent the olfactory lobes. Let us talk about that olfactory lobes by drawing here a diagram. Now, each olfactory lobe consists of two parts. प्रत्येक olfactory lobe चे दोन भाग पडतात. Such as its anterior and oval part is known as olfactory bulb. Olfactory bulb, and the posterior part is known as olfactory tract. Each olfactory lobe shows two parts as anterior and oval olfactory bulb and posterior cylindrical and slightly elongated olfactory tract. The olfactory bulb, it receives olfactory nerve coming from olfactory mucosa, that is nasal mucosa. Please look at the diagram. Consider here is the forehead of that individual and here is supposed to be the nose of that individual. आपण कल्पना करा की या ठिकाणी मी त्या व्यक्तीचा फोरहेड कपाळाचा भाग दाखवलाय, हा नोज दाखवलाय. We have studied in 11th that nasal passages are internally divided into three parts. We have studied in 11. Now the lining of the nasal passages represent nasal mucosa, olfactory mucosa, which contain sensory cells. Nasal passages चा जो सगळ्यात वरचा भाग आहे त्या ठिकाणी सेन्सरी एपिथेलियल सेल्स असतात की जे गंध ज्ञान, सेन्स ऑफ स्मेल ही संवेदना स्वीकारण्याचं कार्य करतात आणि इथून ही संवेदना nasal mucosa पासून olfactory लोब पर्यंत वाहून नेणारी जी चेता आहे, नर्व आहे, तिला म्हटलं जातं olfactory nerve. So I said that असं म्हटलं olfactory bulb receives olfactory nerve coming from nasal mucosa. It means that stimulus of smell, sense of smell is carried by olfactory nerve up to the olfactory bulb. From olfactory bulb, that sensation in the form of electric impulse is carried up to the olfactory center by means of olfactory tract. And here in the olfactory center, the analysis, interpretation of that stimulus is carried out and we get the sensation of particular type of smell. Now, the olfactory bulb or olfactory lobes are comparatively smaller and developed in human being as compared to the other animals. You know, in dogs, the olfactory lobes are highly developed, well developed, and that's why they have a very sharp, acute sense of smell. But in human being, the olfactory lobes are comparatively poorly developed, and that's why we do not have that much great sense of smell like dogs. Second thing, here these olfactory lobes are solid structures. These are not hollow. It does not contain any cavity. Actually, the cavity of olfactory lobes is known as rhinocele. Here rhino stands for rhinencephalon, that is olfactory lobe, and cele stands for the cavity. C-O-E-L, cele. This word stands for coelom, cavity, pokdi, and rhino, this word stands for the nodes or olfactory lobes or rhinencephalon. म्हणजे मानवामध्ये या olfactory lobes मध्ये पोकळ्या नसतात. So here we have considered about the olfactory lobes. Now we have to move to the third and major part of forebrain, that is nothing but the diencephalon. So let us move to the diencephalon. Third part of the forebrain, that is diencephalon. It may be known as thalamencephalon. Here, by drawing a diagram, first of all let me tell you the position of diencephalon in brain. Once again consider, here is supposed to be the lateral view of brain. We have already studied, it is the major part, cerebrum, and we have seen just few minutes before that both cerebral hemispheres are connected with each other ventrally by means of a thick band of nerves known as corpus callosum. It is the largest commissure in human being. Here is supposed to be the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum. Now, here I am going to show somewhat. Here is the midbrain. We are going to talk about midbrain later on. Some other major parts of the brain, that is cerebellum, here I am going to show. Here is the pons varoli. Here is the medulla oblongata. Roughly, here I have mentioned some of the major parts of the brain. Now, we know that here is the corpus callosum and it is the midbrain. Now, the diencephalon, thalamencephalon, it is located below corpus callosum and above midbrain. Or in another words, we can say that diencephalon, it is located in between corpus callosum and midbrain. diencephalon हा भाग corpus callosum आणि midbrain या दोघांच्या मध्ये सर्वसाधारण प्रेझेंट असतो. So we can show here is supposed to be the position of diencephalon. सर्वसाधारण या ठिकाणी diencephalon ची ही पोझिशन असते. Let me show here with the help of pinch chalk. You know, these are the cavities of cerebral hemispheres, that is lateral ventricles, about which we have discussed earlier, which are filled by means of cerebrospinal fluid. Now, this diencephalon is very small part of the brain and it contributes simply 1% of total brain volume. It is not visible externally. एकूण ब्रेनच्या व्हॉल्यूम पैकी आकारमानापैकी डायन्सेफेलॉन हा फक्त 1% भाग असतो आणि हा डायन्सेफेलॉन बाहेरून दृश्य स्वरूपात दिसत नाही बिकॉज इट इज हिडन इनसाइड. It is covered from all sides by means of cerebral hemispheres. Now, the diencephalon is further made up of 3 parts, such as epithalamus, thalami, and hypothalamus. Let us talk one by one each. First one is epithalamus. Epithalamus. It is thin, non-nervous, highly vascular part of the diencephalon. It forms the roof of diencephalon. Try to understand. Epithalamus, it is a non-nervous part, but it is highly vascular. Means it is rich in blood capillaries. It shows a dense network of blood capillaries and it forms the roof of diencephalon. Let me show in diagram. Suppose here is a epithalamus. I said it is highly vascular. It shows a dense network of blood capillaries. It is non-nervous part and it forms the roof of diencephalon. Roof म्हणजे आपल्याला माहित आहे छत. जणू काही डायन्सेफेलॉनचं छत एपिथॅलॅमस हा तयार करत असतो. I said it shows a dense network of blood capillaries and that dense network of blood capillaries of epithalamus is known as anterior choroid plexus. Anterior choroid plexus, it can be abbreviated as ACP. Now here plexus, this word stands for network. Choroid, this word stands for blood or blood supply or blood capillaries, and anterior means the choroid plexus network of blood capillaries present in anterior part of brain. We people will come across such another choroid plexus later on, that is known as the posterior choroid plexus, about which we shall talk later on, that is present in the hindbrain, where I will tell you later on. Now this anterior choroid plexus, that is ACP, is responsible for the secretion of cerebrospinal fluid. Secretion of CSF. ह्या ठिकाणी हे जे anterior choroid plexus आहे, रक्तकेशिकांचं जाळं आहे, हे cerebrospinal fluid रिलीज करत असतं, सिक्रेट करत असतं. This epithalamus, it shows dorsally a small projection, small stalk. Let me show. It is known as pineal stalk. Dorsal side ला epithalamus एक small projection दाखवतो, त्याला pineal stalk असं म्हणतात. And at its tip there is a presence of rounded body, that is pineal body. Pineal body. It may be known as the pineal gland. This pineal gland or pineal body is considered as the vestigial third eye. या pineal body किंवा pineal gland ला vestigial third eye असं पण म्हणतात. Actually, this pineal body, pineal gland is responsible for the secretion of two different chemicals, two different substances, namely serotonin and melatonin. Serotonin, this hormone, it is actually hormone. This hormone is responsible for the maintenance of mood feeling of happiness and relaxation. अर्थात याला हॅपीनेस हार्मोन असं पण म्हटलं जातं. म्हणजे त्या व्यक्तीमध्ये आनंदी वृत्ती टिकून ठेवण्यासाठी, सेन्स ऑफ हॅपीनेस मेंटेन करण्यासाठी सेरोटोनिन हे कारणीभूत असतं. Actually, serotonin, it impacts all the different parts of the body. It also plays important role in other activities such as eating, digestion, sleeping, etc. But whenever there is a less secretion of serotonin in that individual, then there is a chance of depression, anxiety in that individual. It means the main role of serotonin is to maintain the mood feeling of relaxation and happiness. Okay? Second hormone secreted by pineal body is melatonin. Melatonin is basically secreted, released in darkness. Melatonin हे जे हार्मोन आहे पिनियल ग्लँड मार्फत तयार केलं जाणारं, ते प्रामुख्याने डार्कनेस मध्ये, अंधारात, रात्रीच्या वेळेला तयार होत असतं. And it plays important role in the circadian rhythm. Biological rhythms हा एक वेगळा भाग आहे. But mainly it maintains the internal 24 hours clock. Say it maintains different cycles which naturally happens in our body. Anyway, so here I told you about the epithalamus. I told you just now that diencephalon is made up of three parts, of which the first part is epithalamus and it forms the roof of diencephalon. Second part is thalamus, singular thalamus, plural thalami. Thalami are actually a pair of large masses of grey matter. These are large and oval masses of grey matter. They form the lateral walls of the diencephalon. कल्पना करा की एखादी छोटीशी झोपडी आहे आणि त्या झोपडीचं छत हे एपिथॅलॅमस तयार करतं आणि त्या झोपडीच्या दोन्ही बाजूच्या भिंती लॅटरल वॉल्स जणू या थॅलामायच्या स्वरूपात आहेत. थॅलामाय आर नथिंग बट दीज आर टू लार्ज ओव्हल masses of gray matter. हे gray matter चे masses आहेत. Let me show here in the diagram. Suppose here is a thalamus of one side. We know that this diagram represents the lateral view of brain or only half part of the brain. Okay. Now the thalami are called as the gatekeeper of cerebrum. Thalami are also called as the relay center. Why this is so? Let me tell you. Because the thalami are interconnected with each other as well as all the different parts of the brain by means of highly complicated neural system, highly complicated neural circuit, which is togetherly known as reticular activating system, RAS. रेटिक्युलर ॲक्टिव्हेटिंग सिस्टीम. प्लीज ट्राय टू अंडरस्टँड. मी आता असं म्हटलं की जे थॅलामाय आहेत या ठिकाणी एक सिंगल थॅलामस दाखवलाय, मात्र दोन्ही थॅलामाय हे एकमेकांना तसंच ब्रेनच्या इतर सर्व भागांना अतिशय कॉम्प्लिकेटेड किचकट अशा प्रकारच्या न्यूरल सर्किटने जोडलेले असतात. दिस हायली कॉम्प्लिकेटेड न्यूरल सिस्टीम with which the thalami are connected with other parts of the brain togetherly known as reticular activating system. I said that the thalami are called relay center of cerebrum. Why this is so? Because all the different sensory stimuli, all the different sensory impulses coming from different body parts have to pass through the thalami. In the thalami, its analysis, its interpretation is carried out and then they are directed to different parts of the cerebrum, to different centers present on the cerebral hemispheres. आपण काही वेळापूर्वी या ठिकाणी सेरेब्रमवर असणारे वेगवेगळे सेंटर्स, वेगवेगळे एरियाचा अभ्यास केला. वेगवेगळ्या सेंटर्स कडून कोणकोणत्या क्रिया नियंत्रित केल्या जातात त्याचा अभ्यास केला. मग आता मी असं म्हणत होतो की शरीराच्या वेगवेगळ्या भागांकडून येणाऱ्या ज्या संवेदना आहेत, द डिफरंट टाइप्स ऑफ सेन्सरी इम्पल्सेस कमिंग फ्रॉम डिफरंट बॉडी पार्ट्स, दे हॅव टू पास थ्रू थॅलामाय. हियर इन थॅलामाय that all the sensory impulses except olfactory, listen, except olfactory, because few minutes before I told you here is a presence of olfactory bulb, olfactory tract, am I right? And that olfactory tract is directly in connection with the olfactory center present on the temporal lobe of cerebral hemisphere, isn't it? And that's why the sense of smell is directly transmitted to the olfactory center. Olfactory याचा अर्थ काय? The sense of smell. Nasal mucosa कडून आलेला जो सेन्स ऑफ स्मेल आहे, गंधज्ञानाच्या संदर्भातली जी संवेदना आहे ती सरळ ऑल्फॅक्टरी बल्ब कडून ऑल्फॅक्टरी ट्रॅक्ट मार्फत ऑल्फॅक्टरी लोब किंवा ऑल्फॅक्टरी सेंटर कडे पोहोचवली जाते की जो टेम्पोरल लोबवर असतो. मग या ऑल्फॅक्टरी इम्पल्सेस, ऑल्फॅक्टरी स्टिम्युलसच्या व्यतिरिक्त इतर सगळ्या प्रकारच्या सेन्सेशन्स, इतर सगळ्या प्रकारचे सेन्सरी इम्पल्सेस हे थॅलामस मधून पास होतात. In thalamus, its analysis, interpretation is carried out, and then they are directed to different centers present on the cerebrum. आणि नंतर त्यांना सेरेब्रमवर असलेल्या वेगवेगळ्या सेंटर्सकडे डायरेक्ट केलं जातं, कन्व्हे केलं जातं, ट्रान्समिट केलं जातं. अँड दॅट्स वाय द थॅलामाय आर नोन ॲज द रिले सेंटर. नाव लेट अस मूव टू द थर्ड पार्ट, दॅट इज हायपोथॅलामस. Hypothalamus, it forms the floor of diencephalon. Listen once again. I said that consider this diencephalon as a small hut of which the roof is formed of epithalamus. Side walls are formed of these two oval large masses of gray matter, that is thalami, and the floor is formed of hypothalamus. याचा अर्थ डायन्सेफेलॉनचा जो तळ आहे त्याला हायपोथॅलामस असं म्हणतात. बघा हे तिन्ही शब्द एकमेकांशी रिलेटेड आहेत. लुक, सपोज हियर इज अ हायपोथॅलामस. नाव एपिथॅलामस, एपी स्टँड्स फॉर अबव, थॅलामस, थॅलामसचा वरचा भाग, सो दिस इज एपिथॅलामस. दिस इज हायपोथॅलामस, हायपो स्टँड्स फॉर बिलो, means the part of diencephalon present below thalami, present below thalamus, so called as the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus. Now the hypothalamus, it also shows a masses of gray matter embedded in the white matter. या हायपोथॅलामस मध्ये सुद्धा असंख्य ग्रे मॅटरचे मासेस असतात, व्हाईट मॅटर मध्ये एम्बेडेड असतात. that masses of gray matter contain groups of neurosecretory cells. Try to understand. या ठिकाणी हायपोथॅलामस मध्ये असणारे ग्रे मॅटरचे जे मासेस आहे त्यांच्यामध्ये असंख्य न्यूरोसिक्रिटरी सेल्स असतात. म्हणजे काय? These are modified nerve cells which are responsible for the secretion of some hormone. That hormone may be called as the neurohormone because that hormones are secreted by nerve cell. आता हार्मोन काय त्याचा अभ्यास आपल्याला या चॅप्टर मध्ये पुढे करायचा आहे. while discussing about the endocrine system, about the hormones, hormonal system, etc. Temporarily you just remember that these masses of gray matter in the hypothalamus contain large number of neurosecretory cells which secrete neurohormones, namely oxytocin and vasopressin. दोन वेगवेगळे न्यूरोहॉर्मोन्स त्या ठिकाणी तयार केले जातात. About the role of these hormones we shall talk later on while discussing the hormonal system, endocrine system. These masses of gray matter are also known as hypothalamic nuclei. Hypothalamic nuclei. This hypothalamus is also highly vascular. हा हायपोथॅलामस भाग सुद्धा अतिशय व्हॅस्क्युलर आहे. इट हॅज ऑल्सो अ रिच सप्लाय ऑफ ब्लड कॅपिलरीज. इट रिसीव्स द ब्लड बाय मीन्स ऑफ वन ब्लड वेसल नोन ॲज हायपोथॅलामो हायपोफायशियल आर्टरी. हायपोथॅलामो हायपोफायशियल आर्टरी about which we shall talk later on. Now the inferior surface of hypothalamus continues downward in the form of a small slender stalk-like structure known as hypophysis stalk, known as infundibulum. Infundibulum, and it connects the pituitary gland. Here is a pituitary gland. It connects pituitary gland. It is known as the master endocrine gland, about which we shall discuss in the next part of the same chapter. But with the help of this short cylindrical stalk, that is infundibulum, to the hypothalamus. हायपोथॅलामसला पिट्युटरी ग्लँडशी जोडून देण्याचं काम हा infundibulum हा करत असतो. Now the inferior surface of hypothalamus just in front of the pituitary gland shows a crossing of optic nerves known as optic chiasma. Optic chiasma. या ठिकाणी हायपोथॅलामसच्या खाली मात्र पिट्युटरी ग्लँडच्या आधी त्या ठिकाणी ऑप्टिक नर्व्हचं क्रॉसिंग दिसतं. Optic nerves, these are cranial nerves, ज्याचा अभ्यास आपण पुढे करणार आहोत. पण this crossing of optic nerves is known as optic chiasma. In addition to that, it also shows a pair of small rounded bodies known as mammillary bodies. Mammillary bodies. The mammillary bodies is the characteristic feature of mammalian brain only. Mammalian brain only means these mammillary bodies are present only in the mammalian brain. सस्तन प्राण्यांच्याच ब्रेन मध्ये या mammillary bodies दिसतात. And these are responsible, these are concerned, these are important for recollective memory. Now what is the role of hypothalamus? Hypothalamus first of all acts as the center of different involuntary activities. काही अनैच्छिक क्रियांवर नियंत्रण ठेवण्याचे केंद्र हे हायपोथॅलामस आहे. Such as the hunger, thirst, sleep, sex desire, anger, fear, etc. In addition to that, it acts as the connecting link between the nervous system and endocrine system. You will come across later on about the endocrine system, about the endocrine glands. नंतर आपल्याला शिकायला येणार आहे एंडोक्राइन ग्लँड्स काय. पण आपल्या शरीरात असणाऱ्या मानवाच्या शरीरात असणाऱ्या ज्या विविध एंडोक्राइन ग्लँड्स आहेत, डक्टलेस ग्लँड्स आहेत, त्यापैकी मास्टर एंडोक्राइन ग्लँड म्हणून पिट्युटरी ग्लँडला ओळखलं जातं. सो हियर द पिट्युटरी ग्लँड इज कनेक्टेड टू द हायपोथॅलामस and hypothalamus is the part of brain, therefore we can say it acts as the link between the nervous system and endocrine system. In addition to that, the hypothalamus secretes different neurohormones. I told you already, that is oxytocin, vasopressin. Hypothalamus मार्फत हे दोन हार्मोन तयार केले जातात, न्यूरोहार्मोन तयार केले जातात. About their role we shall talk again later on. Also it secretes certain releasing and inhibitory factors. These are also the hormones. These are also some specific chemical substances which influence the functioning of pituitary gland. Pituitary glandच्या कार्यावर नियंत्रण ठेवण्यासाठी काही विशिष्ट प्रकारचे chemical substances ज्यांना releasing factor आणि inhibitory factor म्हणतात ते हायपोथॅलामस मार्फत तयार केले जात असतात. Now the entire diencephalon it encloses a cavity. अर्थात या डायन्सेफेलॉन मध्ये पण पोकळी आहे. It is a hollow structure. After all, I told you it is just like a small hut whose roof is in the form of epithalamus, lateral or side walls are in the form of thalami, and floor is in the form of hypothalamus. The cavity enclosed by diencephalon is known as third ventricle or may be known as diocele. We have already studied the cavities enclosed by cerebral hemispheres are known as lateral ventricles, paracels or first and second ventricles. Am I right? Now here that first and second ventricles, that is cavities of cerebral hemispheres, are in connection, are in communication with the cavity of diencephalon, that is diocele or third ventricle, by means of small opening. That opening is known as foramen of Monroe. Of course, this third ventricle, it is also filled by means of cerebrospinal fluid. So in this manner, in this lecture, we have studied only about the forebrain. While studying forebrain, we have discussed about the three major parts of the brain, that is cerebrum, second olfactory lobes, and third diencephalon. So let us stop here today and bye.